Hey, what's going on, everybody? I'm Vinny Costa, editor of Street Muscle Magazine, and your host of the RodCAST, the all-encompassing car show where we talk about all things automotive. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Greg Acosta, editor of Engine Labs and all-around tech guru. What's up, Greg?
Hey, how are you doing, Vinny?
Doing good, man. Doing really well. I'm excited about today. I've been looking forward to it.
Yeah.
A couple things are new for us. The main thing is that we're switching to we're trying out a pre-recorded format. Although it says live up here in the corner, Greg, are we live?
No, we're not live. We're
Okay.
recording.
Okay. So yeah, that's new. And also we have a very special guest today, man. Someone that I've wanted to have on the show since episode one. And we've finally been able to link up and get our schedules lined. And yeah, so I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
he's going to be a great guest.
yeah,
So,
man.
you ready?
Yeah. Well, so let me do my spiel, man. Let me do my intro. This guy, he's someone I've wanted to interview for a while, so I want to give him his due credit. Our audience will know him from his lengthy career in hot rodding, most notably for his many years as a project manager of GM's performance division, his time as VP of Lingenfelter, and of course for the epic builds he's produced with his own companies, Diversified Creations and now Arrington Performance. Of course, I'm talking about the illustrious Mike Copeland.
How you doing, guys?
Doing well. How are you, Mike?
Doing great. So rainy day here in Detroit, but we take what we get here.
Well, we got sunny skies over here in California. I'll enjoy them later, and I'll think of you. But I really appreciate you being here and taking some time to speak with us. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I enjoy doing this stuff, and of course I enjoy your show. I watch it all the time. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike. That means a lot coming from you. It really does. I'm a big fan. I've been following your career for a long time, and I really appreciate that. I want to jump into it because I feel like we have a lot to talk about, and I have a feeling this is going to be a well-deserved, lengthy interview, and I'm eager to hear the Mike Copeland story, as I'm sure many of our viewers are. So I guess I'll ask you to start at the beginning. I know we'll go down some rabbit holes, but I guess we want to know where are you from and how'd you get here?
well, I was born in Michigan, lived my whole life here. I was born in 1956, which I know is a long time ago for a bunch of you. So, um, my dad and mom were both car people. My dad worked in on cars his whole life. He was a mechanic, that kind of stuff. When I was born, my dad and mom owned a gas station, and not the kind of gas stations that are today. Back in the 50s, they were auto repair places and they sold gas, and a little two bay gas station. My parents used to have to take me to work with them when I was a baby because that was just what had to happen, right? So they used to tell the story that at about 10 months old, I climbed over the walls of my playpen and crawled out into the garage. And when they found me, I was in the middle of a big oil pile with grease and oil and everything all over me. And I think that set a tradition that I followed my whole life, right? So I love anything mechanical. I love automotive. I live for cars. I have 19 of them currently on my own, and I'm not done. I mean, I'm looking at a couple right now. So
That's
I
awesome.
just I love them. I'm in the process of building another new barn, so I have more room to store them at home, and we have a plan to double stack hoists in it so I can get 12 in that
Oh,
one barn.
a kindred spirit, man. Mike, you grew up in the golden age of hot rodding. I mean, I know you kind of joke about that being a while ago or whatever, but honestly, I'm jealous. I feel nostalgic for that time that I never got to live in, and so that's why I enjoy talking to people like you because you tell me so much that I would have otherwise never known. For example, I know while you were also into hot rods and stuff, when in your younger years, you also did a little bit of mini bike racing and stuff, right?
Oh yeah, well, that racing bug, I think you're born with, and I've had it virtually since day one. So anything you can race, I would. It whether it was bicycles or then when I got mini bike, I got my first mini bike I was like 10 years old. Uh, I washed cars and mowed lawns and that kind of stuff to make half of the money to buy my first mini bike, and then my dad and mom paid the other half. So I had that for a little while. I saw a thing in the newspaper they were having a mini bike race, and I showed up at the local airport, convinced my parents to take me, stuck a helmet on my head that was probably 4 sizes too large, and and away we went. Right, and we missed we missed all of the opening and everything else. We showed up late, but they let me race, and I was hooked. I got third place my first race I ever entered, and I was addicted. Right, so
That's awesome.
that led to kind of a whole family involvement. My sister raced mini bikes in the powder puff. I raced them as we, as just a short period of time went on. We got sponsorships from the local mini bike shop, and then that turned into, modifying engines and doing things today that most would never fathom, right? But there was nothing available. You couldn't buy a single part. We used to take the head gaskets out and make them out of aluminum foil and spray tack, and then cut them out with a razor blade to make a head gasket. And
That's
we used to
awesome.
make our own exhaust pipes and poured our own, jugs. And we used to shim the valve springs with flat washers because you couldn't buy another valve spring, right? So it was all that kind of stuff. But that led to me kind of going forward. I got my first manufacturer sponsorship from a company called RUP. I rode for them for a season and had some success. Ended up learning. Of course, that's like anything you do, you learn as you go, right? And the competition kept getting better. We kept getting better. Uh, at the end of my first season with RUP, a number of the people we had dealt with at RUP and the engineers went off and formed their own company called Speedway, and
Oh wow.
they asked me to come uh, race for them. They offered me a really good deal, free bikes and all kinds of stuff, free engines. So we went and raced Speedway for a year, and I raced theirs. The track we raced at, our local track, ran 6 classes, and I rode all 6 classes every week.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so everything from 3.5 stock up to 4 stock, 5 stock, and then modified 3.5, 4, and 5. And then for championship races, they ran an open class. So I rode up to 7 classes. And while the speedways were okay for the bigger classes where you had a lot of power, in the small classes where the stock 3.5, they just wouldn't perform. They were too heavy.
So now, what year was this? How old were you when you were doing all this?
So I was like 12 when I started. So 12, 13, 14, 69, 1969, 1970, 1971.
The way that you're talking about it, it reminds me of and I'm sure that you would have been a fan of his at this time. The gentleman who was racing out here in Elsinore, he eventually became sponsored by Husqvarna. He was a big enduro racer, but he basically raced all classes. He became famous for winning the 6 days trial in Europe. You know who I'm talking about?
I don't know.
He raced with Steve McQueen back in the day, but
Oh,
it reminds me of that.
yeah.
But that's all. So you cut your teeth building these small engines, and so how did you segue that? I guess the natural progression would be cars next.
Yeah, well, it actually next was motorcycles, but the mini bikes taught us so much as I kept growing, right? And so I raced for like 4 years in mini bikes. The last year, our modified bikes were either single or dual engine. We were making our own stroker crankshafts. We were machining our own billet connecting rods, our own billet pistons. We were running them on nitromethane and alcohol. I
Holy
mean, we were making our own camshafts, welding them up, and then regrinding them. I was 14 years old, 15 years old. I knew how to mix nitromethane and alcohol. We used to go to the Ram Charger shop, which is not too far from where I live, and I would buy nitromethane a gallon at a time, and
holy.
they would open their jugs and pump it into a gallon can for me.
So
So
were you reading like a lot of popular mechanics and things like that, or were you picking these things up from guys that were doing the same thing or had been doing it?
it was a little bit of all of that, right? We didn't know. We knew that Frankly, my dad obviously was involved, and he helped a ton. He was a gearhead. But sorry, there's a chassis dyno running in the background. So, but my dad would. We knew that for instance, when you went on nitromethane, that typically you needed to have about a 12 to 16-inch blue flame out the exhaust pipe when you were wound up, and that meant you had enough fuel mixture. So we would drill carburetors and do all that stuff to figure out how to get that. And then I kept getting arrested for riding mini bikes around my house. And so we would load them up and go out to the country and get on a dirt road somewhere and go out and shake them down and all that stuff, right? But yeah, you had to appreciate. We had a 24 by 24 garage, and in my peak seasons, we would have 47 mini bikes in the garage, all
Oh
different
my God.
test bikes and race bikes and practice bikes and all the different classes and everything else. So then we raced go-karts a little bit, so we had 3 or 4 of them. So a lot of that stuff around, right? And ultimately, we raced every weekend. It was what we did. Every Friday we were at the track. Every Saturday we were at the track. Sunday all day at the track, and it kind of wears you out in time. So I don't even know how much money my parents spent on top of the sponsorship supporting us, but it's what we did, right? The whole family did it, and there are 1,000 stories there. But when I left that, I bought a Pinto. It was actually my second car, and we hopped the motor all up, and I started drag racing a little bit. At the same time, I was kind of interested in racing motorcycles, so I went and bought a 250 Suzuki, their motocross bike, and I raced
Yeah,
motocross a while. Didn't really like that. I started racing short track and TT. Really like that,
very
and
cool.
the local track, the best competition was in what they called the mid-level class. So they had like beginner, intermediate, and then pro. The pros were a bunch of phony guys who kind of lived, like they were somebody, but really weren't. So I raced intermediate and did that for a season. The first race, I qualified for the feature and ran dead last. By the fourth race, I was winning, and then the AMA came in, and because I had been a world champion mini bike racer and all that stuff, they decided I had to race the pro class. So I went to race pro, and I destroyed them. They weren't even competition. So
So this was at what, like 14, 15 years old?
that was at 16, because I used to
Oh
take
my
my own
God.
bike, my own car, and drive out to the track with my motorcycle, and I would go out on practice nights. And I grew up racing, right? So I wasn't like a lot of these guys that show up at the track and their goal is fun, right? For me, it was fun to win. So I
Right.
would go to the track, getting full dress, leathers, helmet, everything else, go on a 90-degree day and make 50 lap runs just because I kept getting better and better, right? And I would just beat my bike without mercy, but I had full maintenance
Now,
programs I ran, everything else. And so I
now
did
this was the
that.
250,
Yeah,
right?
that was the 250.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, it was all modified, and it was
So you're
fun.
cooking at what, like about 100 miles an hour?
Yeah, close to that. And then, of course, you didn't have brakes. So you grab the compression release and throw it on its slot on its side, slide the corner, and be on the throttle halfway through and come out with the thing flying.
That's awesome.
So
So that photo that we saw there just a moment ago that Greg put up, when was this? How old were you, and where were you racing?
I was about 13 in that picture. That was at a place called Eagle Park, which was here in Michigan, out in Novi, Michigan. That was my home track. That was actually a 5-horse stock bike. So, we tie the governors, and that's all you were allowed to do to them. You couldn't do anything else to the motor.
That's
And
wild, though. I mean, you by the age of 16, you're already a world champion at something. I don't know that there's many people in the world that could say that. I mean, did that resonate with you at the time?
oh no, it was just another race, and I was there to win
That's awesome.
it. My goal was to win, nothing else. Win. right? And that bike that's in that picture, at one point I was racing that, and I used to ride just like that: t-shirt, helmet, blue jeans, and boots. And we used to have to resole my boots every 3 weeks because I would wear the soles off of them. It was a half-mile track with 13 turns, so you
Oh,
were
wow.
always left and right and everything else, right? So, but I came off that bike one time leading a race on the front stretch at about 45 miles an hour and skidded down the straightaway. And when I landed and skidded all over, I jumped up, and at that point, the entire field was coming at me. And I actually think I jumped over one bike, right? So he didn't hit me, but it took all the skin off of both arms from the shoulders to the wrists, both legs
Oh,
from my knees to my ankles, and a big patch off of my side. So my parents took me to the doctor, and they gave me some salve and stuff so I wouldn't get any scabs. And all week long, I had to ride my bicycle everywhere. And I was at this point 14
oh man.
and 13 or 14. I think I was 14. And so we went out. My dad didn't say anything, right? But he thought I'd be done because it was a pretty traumatic crash and all that. So we loaded up on Thursday night. Now, this was the week prior to the World Championship where people came from all over the country to race. And it was the best of the best, right? So we went out on Thursday night to test. I started wearing a denim jacket then, and still blue jeans, boots, and a helmet. And on my first test session, on my 3.5 horse stock, I broke the track record.
Wow. With the salved up and everything?
Oh yeah, everything else, right? They smear me down with salve, and then the jacket rubbed on the salve and the pants, and but
Oh,
I
brutal.
was there to race, right? That was
Well,
just
to your credit, I mean, I know some tough people and I know some tough kids now, but I just, I hear these stories and I think, man, people were just built different back then. They just were tough. And, so it's inspiring. At that point, when you were already a little bit older, you had your car and stuff. Did you ever envision your life in this path, like that racing mini bikes and the racing motorcycles would lead to this career that you've had?
well, I pretty much expected I would race, because I love going fast. I love racing. But, my dream when I was young and my goal for a career was to be a car mechanic. That was exactly what I intended to do. It's what my dad had done, and then he went into management in the dealers and was running the dealer, but that's what I wanted to be, was a mechanic, right? So you got to realize from the time I was like 4 or 5 years old, my dad worked in the garage, and I was out there all the time. I have memories of probably being 4 years old, 5 years old, with my hand up in the door of a '54 Ford, holding a nut so my dad could put a bolt in to hold a window regulator in. Right?
That's fantastic.
I mean, I was 9, 10, 11 years old in the garage all the time with my dad working on cars. I got my first car at 14, and that was actually my mom's. It was a '70 Torino GT convertible 429 automatic car.
Oh, hell yeah.
And she got hit in the back end and smushed her into another car, so it banged both ends on it, and the insurance company totaled it. So my dad bought it back, and he and I fixed it. I mean, we
That's
rebuilt
awesome.
the front end. We did all that work. We straightened everything, and then had it painted. And so I had a car when I was 14 years old, and I would leave school. I get out of school. I lived about 6 blocks from school, and I would run home on summer days at 14, back the car out of the garage, down the driveway, put the top down on it, and sit there in my car and be cool when the other kids walk by going home from school.
I love it. I love it. That's awesome.
And then I
Hey,
learned to do
Mike,
brake torques.
um, if you reach a point in our conversation where you've supplied us with several photos, so if you reach a point where you want to reference a photo, just let us know and we'll put it up on screen.
Okay,
But
cool. All right.
so
So,
you're there. You got your first car. You're having fun racing. What next?
well, then I decided to get serious about racing. So I bought. I had a '73. First, I had a Torino. Then I had a Pinto that we hopped the motor all up in. That was the first car I ever really drove. But it was a '72 Pinto on D60 13s. It ran 1550 at like 90 miles an hour and a quarter.
In a Pinto. What'd you have in that thing?
It had I put Jan's 12-to-1 compression pistons in it. Had dual Delorto side draft carburetors, a header, a gear. It had a Ford Racing cam. I had friends that worked at for C.J. Batten, who was a famous head porter during the day, and they had ported the head and done some work in it for me.
I'm
So,
curious, with so many people, it seems like the easy way now is to just swap things, right? Just put an LS in it or whatever other engine you want to put in there. At the time, probably a small block Chevy. Um, were you a fan of just working with what you had, or was just out of necessity?
well, you got to remember, I was barely 16, right? So
Hmm.
I was 15 when I built the car. It was done before I was 16, and my parents would let me drive with it on my permit and that kind of stuff. we I had a friend I went to high school with. Now my high school, we drag raced every day before school, during lunch, and after school. So we now my one of my best friends had a '67 Cougar 390 GTA car,
Okay.
and so I used to
I'm
ride with
noticing a
him all.
trend here.
Yeah, I used to ride with him all the time. And we snuck home one day and took my Pinto out, and then he drove, right, and I just rode passenger. But we got into a bunch of street races, and to 60 miles an hour, that car was a terror. I mean,
Yeah,
it
I bet
weighed
you broke a lot of
1,800
hearts.
pounds. It was 1,800 pounds, and we turned at 8,000 RPM. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
so,
awesome.
so we got in a bunch of street races, then snuck it home, put it back in the garage, and my parents didn't know anything about that, of course. So then I convinced my dad to go to the car wash with me, let me drive, so I can wash my car. Well, it had a tire that had a bad spot in it, right? This thing had Ansons on it, and it had, we made an exhaust and
Yeah.
did all that stuff, right? So we go to the local hot rod gas station and pull in, not really thinking about it. It was a Sunoco station where you could buy 260, and at 12-to-1, I needed good fuel. So we filled the car up, and then my dad says, "Well, let's get that tire changed. Let's have the spare tire taken off the wheel and put on your mag wheel." So I asked them, "Yeah, we can do that." So they pull it inside the station and start to do the tire. Well, then I realized this is the hot rod hangout where all of the people are, and two of the guys who had cars we'd outrun with it work there. So one of them starts. I hear people rumbling, and that's the car that beat Tommy. That's the car that beat Jared. Oh shit, I'm busted.
Oh.
So I come clean to my dad, and he's like, "Well, what's the important thing? Did you win?" Oh yeah, we won. So
I see
then
where you
I
get it
ended up,
from.
yeah. Then I ended up. I was 16. I had a job washing boats, and then so I got a job at that gas station, and that station was owned by a guy named Dave Lyle, and Dave was a kind of a semi-famous Ford racer. Had run a number of Mustangs, running in super stock and then pro stock, and had one is called Going Thang is what they called its Mustang. So, but then so I got a job there pumping gas, and Dave's like in his 80s. He's still a friend. We talk
That's
fairly
awesome.
often on Facebook, but we ended up. This was a three-bay Sunoco gas station, and more them than me, right? Because I was still young and learning. But we built a Pinto Pro Stock car in the third bay and went drag racing, at Indy and shit, and actually qualified at Indy in the 16th position in
That's
70
awesome.
73. So,
So you're
but
what, like 16, 17 years old at this time?
yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
So, but my disease and my addiction, they were set, right? And so I continued down that path. Shortly after the Pinto, I got a new 73 Mach 1 351 HO car, and I started tearing it apart, of course, and I put a gear in it, and I put headers and a different intake, different carb, all this stuff. Now, at this point, I had gotten a job. My dad ran a Ford dealer, and they had given me a job working there as an apprentice mechanic. So I was going to a Ford job entry training program school for mechanics. It was 26 weeks long. So I was doing that. I'd go to school a week, work a week, go to school a week, work a week, driving this Mach 1, drag racing it on Saturday nights and Sundays. And it was a high 13-second car on a
Pretty quick
G60
for back then, yeah.
14 or G60 15 tire. Yeah, but it kept getting wrecked. That car had a bad omen on it, and
Hitting crowds.
everywhere I took it, somebody would run into it.
Ah,
So finally, the last time I called my dad and I said, "I'm done with this car." I was on the way to school and I had hit a car. That one was my fault. And so I said, "I'm done with this car. It's got to go." And so I said, "I'm going to buy a Bronco." And he said, "Well, you've always, you love going fast. You love drag racing. Why don't you get serious about drag racing and go?" He said, "Just buy like a Maverick is the lightest car you can get with a V8. Buy that and let's go racing." It sounds like a deal to me. So, I ordered a brand new Maverick, double black, 302, 3-speed manual. That was the only trans you could get. And bucket seats. Well, about 2 weeks later, we get a thing from Ford that says they're not going to build the car because it's too late in the year.
hmm.
So we dealer trade a Maverick, find one at a dealership, which by coincidence is at the same exit as Milan Dragway is, exit 25 here in Michigan, Plank Road.
Okay.
And it was this tiny little Ford dealer with a one-car showroom, and this Maverick was sitting in the showroom. So we dealer trade it. I go pick it up at lunch on a Thursday afternoon. I take it back to the dealer, finish the paperwork, drive it home that night, wheels and tires. On Sunday, I'm at Milan Dragway in it. So it's got 150 miles on it.
Awesome.
Runs 1650s, bone stock with mag wheels and different tires. I take it home, tear the entire drive line out of it. So it's got no engine, trans, axle. Yeah, that's the car, but that's 45 years later. But
Okay.
that's the way it looks today. So
So, but it
I
wasn't
tear the whole
grabber
drive line
blue
out of
back
it.
then. It was
I
black.
put a top loader 4-speed in it, Anson scatter shield, a 9-inch with a Detroit locker, a 444 ring and pinion, and I'm waiting for headers and bearings for the motor to show up. And it comes Friday night, then into Saturday morning, and I decide, hey, the track's open tomorrow. So I put the stock 302 back in it and cut the mufflers, cut the H pipe off, and hang a pair of glass packs off the mufflers and head back to the drag strip. So now it runs 1550 with a gear and a 4-speed. I race it on Sunday, drive it home on Sunday night. The motor's back out of it, and the parts show up. I put the motor together, put it in the car. The next Saturday night at Detroit Dragway, it runs 1170 with a Paxton blown small block in it and a top loader and a 9-inch.
Holy hell. So over the course of what, three weeks?
Yeah, 2.5. Yeah, 3 weeks. Yeah.
Holy hell. You went from running mid-16s to running mid-11s
Yeah.
in a brand new Maverick. I love it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm street racing a little bit, driving it to and from work. I'm at Detroit Dragway like a week or two later. And the only way to leave the starting line, now, I don't know that much, right? I'm still learning the game. So the only way to leave the starting line is at like 8,800 RPM. And with the gear and a transmission ratio and all that stuff. So, and looking back, it needed more trans ratio to make it work. But that I was 17, right? So I get the thing out and I'm leaving the starting line at 8,800 and shifting at 8,000. And it drops a valve and scatters the motor. I mean, and it broke literally every part in it. I took the intake off and the valve covers and threw the rest out. So then I build another small block, more radical, put it in it. I'm trying to break the motor in. And in those days, especially when you were 17, I didn't know. I mean, I knew to check bearing clearance and all that stuff, but you didn't. There weren't half sizes of bearings and all that stuff, right? So you built a motor, and if it's a street motor, you tried to set the mains about 2 thousandths, and on a race motor you set them about 2.5, which is not terribly different than today, but you didn't have the option to just do the thing. So if you ended up with one that was a little tight, it was smart to not RPM it a bunch and just kind of drive it some, right? Put like 500 miles on it and break it in.
Okay.
So I put the motor together, put it in the car. I left the blower cover. If you know anything about Paxton's, you could leave the cover off the top of the blower. It was a Shelby Mustang blower, and leave the
Okay.
belt off and just drive it, right? So I was driving it some. I had maybe 50 miles on it. I lived in a town called Plymouth. We street raced a ton out there. And some loudmouth comes in from out of town talking smack. And I go home, put the blower belt on it and the cover, and we meet out on the highway, right? And so I destroyed him. I didn't even need the blower to beat him. But anyway, I did. Next day, I'm driving it to work, and it spins a rod bearing.
Oh, brutal.
So,
Well,
part,
sometimes you're baited.
another small block, blew that one up. Then I switched to Cleveland motors, and I broke a ton of Clevelands. But so I had that car. I bought it in '74. I got married in December of '75. Right, and at that point, I couldn't afford the $91 car payment. I had to sell the car so I could buy a house. So I sold that car. I sold my motorcycle. I had a custom van, which was really popular then, with all the
Heck yeah.
fancy, crushed velvet interior.
Yeah. I love vans. I have one.
Yeah. Yeah. This was a '75 Ford.
Oh, cool. You had the slant nose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I sell all that stuff off, buy a house, buy a Ranchero '67 for a daily driver.
Nice.
And then, bought a Pinto wagon, one that had rusted out and resurrected. That was my wife's car. So, but I sold the Maverick. It had 2,500 miles on it when I sold it in '76. So, jumping ahead, long story, 35 years later, I found that car and bought it back.
That's
and
awesome.
That's the picture you guys showed a minute ago. That was today. And when I redid it, I did it the way I would have then if I had the skill and the money I have today, right? So today it's actually, I kind of put it in two different looks, but in that look it has the single four on it now, but it's done very much the way it would have been in the '70s. I mean, it's got things like, it's a full rotisserie. Every bolt in the motor compartment's chrome. It's a 408-inch aluminum headed Cleveland with a solid roller that we copied the NASCAR truck specs for. I mean, it idles at like 1,500 and shakes windows and stuff.
That thing's fantastic. I love the color too.
Oh yeah, well that's the original color. But
oh really? I thought it was black. Oh no, they wouldn't sell you the black one.
They wouldn't build a black one, so I got a blue one. But anyway, it had it had stuff on it then. Like there was a company called JR that made a pro stock header for Mavericks. I put a set of those in it. They were still in it when I got it back. So I found
awesome.
it 35 years later on Craigslist. It has 4,900 miles on it. Bought it back and built it like it is. So, but I have things like a tunnel ram with a pair of 660s. I have an original Moroso Jones cable drive tack with a unobtainium, a cell dual point 3 bearing tack drive distributor. I mean, I have all of those parts, right?
It's total period correct day 2 car. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I have motor wheel flies for it. I have Krager Super Tricks for it, and I have regular Kragers. All 3 sets, all with wheels and tires. And so, but that's one of mine. But
that's awesome. Hey, I got to ask you, did George Lucas consult you at all when he was making American Graffiti? Because I got to tell you, when you're telling this story about this guy goading you into street racing him, I'm like, dude, that's the movie.
Yeah. No, but interesting story about American Graffiti. When that movie came out, I was 17 years old. I had that '73 Mach 1. And it was high school drags was on Saturday. This is Friday night. I I run up to my cousin had a job that steam cleaned carpet, and they blew a circuit breaker in the house. So I have to run up to get circuit breakers because my parents ran out. I get my car is glowing, the hood scoops are open for ram air. I mean, I'm ready, right? I leave. I go to Kmart. I buy the circuit breakers. I'm leaving Kmart, and a girl that must be high on pot in a '69 Camaro takes the front end off of my Mustang.
Oh no! I mean, thank God you weren't in the car, but
No,
geez,
I was
no, the
in the
car.
car. I was driving it down the aisle. She
Oh,
cut through the rows of the cars across the parking lot and
oh,
hit the front end and
come
knocked it out
on.
sideways like a foot. Anyway, that happened on Friday night. So Saturday I didn't go racing, but Saturday night I went to see American Graffiti.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a good story.
Yeah.
Um,
But
so I have another question. So, I mean, you're at the drag strip quite a bit. You're known around town as somebody who knows his way around a car. But you're 17 years old. At the time, was that like, were there a lot of other kids your age doing the same thing, or were you kind of an outlier and older guys were like, "Hey, check out this kid"?
there were some other young guys doing it, right? Most of them not as serious as me, right? And I mean, I know I'm jumping around, but there's a million stories, right? When I was like 13, I talked my way into at one of the big national event kind of things they held at Detroit Dragway. My friend and I talked our way into being on Bruce Larson's crew for his USA One funny car, right?
That's awesome.
So I mean, like, convinced my dad and his buddy to take us there to their hotel and drop us off, so we could polish wheels on the car and stuff in the parking lot while they ran, warmed it up and did all that stuff. They
Yeah, man,
snuck
this
us
is
into Detroit Dragway in the sleeper or the truck. I mean, so
yeah, this is just in your blood.
we're on. I'll never forget where they used to park all of the funny cars. They had like 16 funny cars, and they would line them up in this section before the starting line. So we're down there on the starting line. Of course, you had to be 16, but we're 13 and we're there. And we're in this group. I mean, and the two Mickey Thompson Mustangs are there, the red one and the blue one.
Hmm.
Roger Lindemood in the Color Me Gone car is there. Jungle Lip Jim Lieberman's car is there, but he's not
Yeah.
driving it. I
Okay.
mean, the Chi-Town Hustler. I'm on the starting line with all of these guys, right?
Man.
And I'm this 13-year-old kid walking around, right? So we go up, start the car, right? We got the tow, the ramp truck, and the starter for starting the car and everything is in a milk crate on the back of it. So put it on. There's only Bruce Larson and his crew chief. That's all they had. So that's how we talked our way into helping. So like he lights the car, pulls that starter off and hands it to me, and I almost collapse. It's so heavy, right? But I wander back to the thing, get it in the milk crate. I mean, it's stuff like doing the burnouts through the rosin. It's the car makes its pass, and we're hanging off the back of the ramp truck going down the quarter mile, right? And to pick him up, tow him back up the return road. I mean, that was my life. Got to do all of that stuff.
That's awesome. I gotta ask, like, well, obviously, I'm assuming that after that you were a huge fan of his ever since. But at that time, who were your heroes? Who were you really looking up to at that time?
Well, I was a dyed in the wool Ford guy, right? I mean, I'd grown up a Ford guy. My youngest memories of racing or being in the back seat of my dad's '64 427 dual quad 4-speed car while he's street racing on Telegraph and climbing up and looking out the window to see who we're racing. I mean, my sister, my mom, and myself, we would go get in street races, and we would go out and we would get out of the car and then stand on the side of the road, and my mom would flag my dad and whoever he was racing off.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
getting pulled over with my sister, myself, and some friends of ours, their two daughters, in the back seat of this '64 Galaxy 427 car, which was a convertible, by the way. And my mom and another lady driving it. My mom driving, the lady riding passenger with her. My mom gets in a street race with a Fuelie Corvette. and beats him, and we get pulled over by the cops and the flashlight shining in the car. I mean, that was my everyday world, right? I think as far as heroes, it was pretty much my dad, right? I mean, because
That makes sense.
there was nothing he couldn't do. I mean, I'd watch him do things like one time he took our washing machine apart because the inner drum had been out of balance so much it had rubbed a hole through the outer drum, and he completely disassembled the thing and brazed up all of the gap and reassembled. I remember looking at that thing in pieces all over the floor and thinking, how will I ever learn to do that? Right? And today I can do that. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I could, when I was in my 30s, but it's just it's learning that thing, right? So, I mean, there are just so many things. The Bob Ford Thunderbolt being parked beside my house because the guys that drove it and ran it came to our house because that's where a lot of the 427 Ford guys hung out and stuff. I mean, you know,
So, so Mike, I mean, you graduate from this university of hot rodding, right? And so you're out of high school, you're getting serious about racing. You got some money in your pocket. You get married, and things start to progress. You sell some of your hot rods, and you're living this life now. What happens next?
all right. So I'm humping, so I got a wife, I got two kids, I got a mortgage, car payments, all that stuff, right? So I am, really, and we had made a decision that my wife was going to stay home and raise the kids, right? As long as we could. So for the first 10 years I was married, my wife stayed home, took care of the kids. I worked all day in the dealership. I was a line mechanic, and then I went into management and did all that. But then I would come home every night and work every night, 5 nights a week in the garage till 11, 12 at night repairing cars. And then Saturday from 7 in the morning till 8 at night, every Saturday repairing cars. And that's how we lived. I mean, I made more money in the garage than I made at the day job at the dealer, and that's how we supported ourselves, and that's how we did those things, right? Every year she would give me money from the, she would let me take the tax return, right? And I would take some of the money that I earned, and I would build, my own cars. I'd have my own hot rods. I always had to sell one to build another one, right? Because I didn't have all that money. um, One of the pictures I sent you is a cover of CarCraft magazine. That was
Yeah.
my first ever full magazine feature.
Oh
Okay,
wow. Okay.
so that was
Greg,
in
can we throw
in
that one up? There we go.
yeah, that one. So the gray Mustang you see in the second row, that was mine. It was kind of a precursor to Pro Street. It had a tunnel ram Boss 351 in it, C6 automatic, 9-inch center lines, skinnies in the front, big tires in the back. And in those days, you stuck them out the wheel well. Most
Right.
people didn't tub their cars because it just wasn't done right.
Right.
So, but that picture was taken on the Indy 500 track at the CarCraft Street Machine Nationals.
That's
So
awesome.
in 1980, that was my third year. 77. That was my fourth year at the Street Machine Nationals, and that I started the first year in '77 with a '67 Ranchero, and then I just progressed through, right, different cars every year. So, but that was a true garage built car. I paid $50 for that, drug it out of a garage where somebody had hacked with an axe a 429 into it, tied it down with chains, and I brought it home. And a year later, it was on the cover of CarCraft. We painted it in
Amazing.
a garage. I built the motor on my workbench. I mean, we wired the car, plumbed the car, everything. And that car ran bottom 13s, high 12s, just the way it was, right? But that was my first ever magazine feature. Right?
Okay.
And I was so excited. I mean, it was beyond belief to be, be pulled out and say, hey, we were at the Indy 500 track when that photo was shot. And, that was every car guy's dream, right? I
Oh, so
had
you had no idea that you were going to be on the cover.
No, no, none at all. And the two previous years of the Street Machine Nationals, they had pictures of a car of mine in the story for the Street Machine National. One was a Cobra 2 that had a hopped up small block in it, a bunch of other stuff. Another was I had a new 79 Z28 Camaro that we took down last minute.
Oh
And
yeah.
they had a potato race there, they called it, where you basically ran an autocross course, but you had to stop in specific spots, and your passenger had to throw a potato in the bucket. And
Okay.
so I had this new 79 Z28 that was my wife's. And my buddy is still one of my best friends today. I tell him, I said, look, I said, I'm going to be an animal in here, right? Everybody's like poking through and putting throwing the potato in the bucket. And if you miss the bucket, you have to get out of the car, get the potato, get back in the car, and then throw it in the bucket again. So I tell my buddy, I'm not slowing down and I'm not stopping. You got to hit the bucket, right? So I go into this course, I mean, foot flat on the floor. I go straight from drive to reverse because you had to go through this X pattern and put the potatoes in the buckets and big circle sweeper, another like pulling garage and out. Well, the final potato, they had a finish line, and you had to hit this potato in a bucket right as you got to the finish line, right? And the way the thing was set up, you had to have a tire in the finish line box, and the potato had to be in at the to finish the course, right?
Okay.
So I go into the last part of it, and I've got this thing sideways, smoke rolling off the tires, and as I slide into the garage sideways, I got the left tires in the parking garage, and my buddy is out of the car. We got T-roofs and we got them out, and he is at his knees slamming the last potato in the bucket.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
And they got that photo and ran it in the magazine, right? So anyway, and then the Mustang feature. So that was 3 years in a row, one being a feature in the cover.
And
So
that's how autocross was invented, ladies and gentlemen.
it was. I mean, they ran a Gymkhana too without the potatoes, but the potato
Yeah,
thing was what made it magic. So
that's awesome, man. That's so cool.
yeah.
So okay, so I'm curious, Mike. We've talked about a few like trends, and it's a question I was going to save until the end of our conversation, but it seems pertinent now. Um, you talked about the Maverick that you rebuilt, and period correct day two style. Then you talked about building something that was a precursor to Pro Street. What trends have you seen come and go? Which ones did you think weren't going to last and did? Which ones did you think were going to last and didn't? And which ones did you like and not like?
Well, that's tough, right? Because when you've been around as long as I have and you've been doing this stuff, right? The magazine set the trends. They truly defined what it was, right? And they started in California, of course, because that's where all the magazines were, and they would shoot all the photos, and that's the stuff you saw in the magazine. So then you would, people all over the country would try and copy it a lot, right? Try and emulate that and try to be that, make their car that cool, right? I don't care who you were in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and in the early 2000s. The real measure of success as a car builder or as a car person, even before there were all the pro builders, right, was your car in a magazine. People lived to get their cars in magazines, whether it's a truck, it's a lowrider, it's a whatever it is, a drag car. Being in a magazine was the wearing all of that, was recognition. That was everything you ever.
No problem. You were saying about to be
So
in the magazine.
yeah, the magazine set the trends, right? And everybody, wanted to be there, and the trendsetters, the cars of that day, were what got the magazines, right? I mean, I lived the the muscle car kind of. I was on the end of the muscle car craze, right? So I mean, I was right there where it kind of died. I wasn't around. I couldn't drive in 69 or 70 when all those cars came out, right? I started driving in like 72. So when I got to the other end of that, right? So the power was falling down some. Cars were not you couldn't buy gas for a period of time, right? In 74, 75, you
Right.
couldn't buy gas, right? I mean, I had a
Yeah.
chance to buy, just stepping back real quick, in 1973, 72, I had a chance to buy a 69 Boss 429 Mustang with like 12,000 miles for $1,800.
Why are you doing this to me, Mike? Come on. Gee,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, that's
oh
a whole
man.
nother story. We'll have to tell another time. But, um, I mean, that's just what it was, right? So cars went through that
Man.
transition. And then when the stuff came around and we got into cars that were, you just, there was no power in them, right? I mean, it was such a bad time in the mid 70s for performance people. I mean, if you had 150 horsepower in a new car, you were somebody,
Yeah.
right? And we had emission crap and we had all that other stuff. And then in the late 70s, they just got worse and worse. And then I remember as they started to come kind of out of it, right? They built in 82, they built the Mustang GT, which was on the Fox body platform, the early version of that. And you could get in 82, you could get it with a 302 two barrel and a 4-speed transmission, and that was the bad car of the year. So naturally, my wife got one. But that was, and that thing was, I don't know, it was, under 200 horsepower, I think, right? But that was that time. And but as far as trends, as we went through, the muscle cars, then when there was no power in cars, vans got really popular, right? Because they were cool and you could make them unique and all of that stuff. They were an open canvas to do whatever you wanted. Plus, there were
I told you, Greg.
vans and all that stuff, and a lot of young hot chicks not wearing much clothes. It was all of the priorities for men.
Yeah.
But all of that went on, right? And then Pro Street came around, right? Where it was basically you took a race car and put it on the street again, and narrow the axles. Ultimately, uh, you know, I remember when I had my first tunnel ram out of the hood on a car with velocity stacks. I was scared to death I'd get pulled over everywhere I went, right? Every time I saw a cop, I knew I was getting pulled over. You just knew you were getting a ticket, right? But they didn't, and that's kind of how that evolved. In the late in the 80s, that kind of led to some of the custom painted cars with the stripes and that kind of stuff. I remember I bought a '79 Z28 Camaro used with a bad motor, drug it home. Was just going to do a small block 4-speed car, drive it to and from work, and have a little fun with it. And then I got it home, and the next thing you know, it ended up with a big block in it, and then it ended up with a turbo 400 and a like a 4,000 stall converter, and then a 410 gear and all that stuff. And then of course I had to paint it, and I had the body done. It just it's that was the era, right? Had some graphics done on the side of it, and today you'd look at it and go, "Oh God, why did anybody do that?" Right? But
No, that's right up my alley. I love that.
in the day, it was cool, right?
Yeah.
And, and then that led to I bought a '92. No, I bought an '84 Ford Ranger in about '90 from a heating and cooling place, and this thing was beat to death. I mean, there wasn't a straight piece of metal on it. But again, I'm still at this point. I'm working at GM, but I'm just I'm a technician there. Experimental assembler they call us, at hand build the prototypes. So I buy this thing, drag it home, and right away rip this 4-cylinder out of it. I put a small block together, put it in it, put an automatic 8.8 rear axle, small nitrous kit, runs 1270s on a little 9-inch slick, and I'm driving it 45 miles each way, to and from work. It's just, I mean, that's just the kind of stuff we did, right?
Well,
So
Mike, and I want to stay the course here. I want to follow the path that you took, and like I said, we'll probably go down some rabbit holes here, but that's all right. Um, so, I guess to surmise what you've said, lots of trends have come and gone. We're still in there are a lot of current trends that are going on, pro touring and things like that. Um, which ones? Did it seems that as though you've taken part in almost all of them. Which ones have been your favorite?
I love the muscle car thing. Did then, do today. Always loved street strip cars. Right. I mean, to me, not as much today because it's a lot easier to go fast. But when I built that Maverick and it ran 1170s, that was a bad car on the street.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
there weren't, in the mid 70s, there weren't many, mid 11-second cars on the street. I mean, there was a few, but not a lot. And
Well, to your point, I know you said like, oh, who would want that today, but really they're being at the forefront of this industry, like, yeah, there's these high dollar pro touring builds, many of which you've put together, and those are amazing. They're beautiful to look at. They're beautiful to see go around a track. They can handle like better than a modern car. But there's been this resurgence with like those day two cars. People like to see these vintage photos, and that's why I was really excited to have you on, because I knew you would have these stories. And even the whole vanning craze, it's like seen a resurgence. I have a G10 that I'm building for the magazine, so that's why I'm inquiring about the trends that you liked and didn't like.
yeah,
But
I was not obviously the 80s were a terrible time. You know, late 70s, 80s were a terrible time to be a performance car guy, right? Um, I started playing off road, early bobtail Broncos. I think I've had 5 or 6 of those. I've had the big Broncos, Blazers, 4x4 trucks. I've probably had, if you count my daily drivers in that, I've probably had 45 of them. And I've had over 400 cars.
oh man, I thought I had a lot. Holy hell!
But I just I love the pro touring cars. I have a high end Chevelle that's actually my wife's pro touring, all aluminum, 508-inch big block in it, fuel injected, Tremec, all of the good stuff, right? Big Bear brakes, all of that, and I like all of that, and but I truly enjoy the late model performance. I like the early muscle car stuff. I can't leave it stock. I had a 70 Boss 302 Mustang recently. I sold it few years back. 31,000 original miles. Had 2 documented original tires on it. It was all numbers match. It was everything, right? I loved owning it. I hated driving it. It
Really?
was, yeah, it was a no power steering car.
Uh,
The old top loader was a 391 gear car. It was just terrible.
yeah. You compare it to hopping in a new Hellcat or something. It's just
Yeah,
two different worlds.
yeah, it is. So there were just a
So
lot of things, a
I'm
lot of those different eras. I love the vans. I'd like to have one again. It's kind of on my list to find.
you said it. You said it, Mike.
Yeah, I did the. I don't know. Most people probably don't know. When I was at Lingenfelter, I supported Hot Rod with the Roadkill van and the
Oh
LS7 that went
yeah,
in it. I did so.
yeah.
And then they banged the motor in it, and then they ended up shipping it to me, and we did all that work and swapped the motor and fixed everything, and then we took it on power tour. So we've
That
done a
was a
lot of
totally
crazy
cool
stuff.
van. Yeah.
Yeah. So hey, I
So I'm
want to
curious.
warn you. My phone just told me I got 10% life back, so left. So, and I don't have
Oh.
a cord in my desk, so
Oh. Okay.
I just want to warn
Well,
you that. So if we have to break, if we end up, I can
yeah, we can continue
get a
later or
cord
something.
somewhere and continue at home or something.
Yeah, 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 no problem. I don't. I know it's getting late over there for you guys. It's
I ain't
already
worried about that.
5:30.
I want you to know about that. So
I appreciate that, Mike.
yeah.
Okay, so then I guess we'll move along. So how'd you end up working at GM? Your dad was a Ford guy, and then you seemed like a were going to be a lifelong Ford guy. How'd you end up at GM?
Yeah, I was on that path, and I decided I wanted my own business. Right, my dad had always wanted his own business, and he never could make that step. Right, it was just too big a risk, and I wanted my own business, and to do that, I, started in dealers when I started sweeping the parking lot in a Ford dealer at 14 years old, and then worked my way up to mechanic, and then worked my way up into management, and then I was running a dealer and doing that kind of stuff. Then I went back to being a mechanic because I really enjoyed it, truthfully. Well, then I wanted my own company, and I knew I needed to learn a lot more than Ford to do that. So I took a job at a 13 bay independent shop because they did everything, right? Every kind of car. They also were a Corvette specialty shop, and they owned a marine business. So they used to build a lot of offshore stuff, right? And a lot of drag stuff, jet boats, flat bottom boats, that kind of stuff. So I took a job there. I worked there. Within a year, I was running the place. At 3 years, and I mean, I was building offshore boat motors, twin turbo big blocks, all that kind of stuff. I was doing regular car repairs. I was doing frame ups on Corvettes. I was doing all that kind of stuff, right? Still, like so many out there that are probably going to watch this, that are undiscovered and under the radar, and you do what you do, and you never see your name in a magazine, or you never get anywhere and on a TV show or anything, right? So I lived that path, right? That's what I was doing. And I was looking, I wanted to try and buy half of that business, and they wouldn't sell it to me. So I was looking for a building to open my own company. And as I was doing that, I ended up, a friend of mine worked at GM, and I was talking to him one night, and he said, they're looking for these guys they call experimental assemblers. They're skilled trades. They hand assemble the prototypes in the future cars. So he said, give me a resume and I'll do that. I didn't even know what the hell a resume was. So I had to figure out how to write a resume. Luckily, a friend of mine's wife knew how to do it. We wrote this one-page resume that probably couldn't get you a job today at the local Dairy Queen. But anyway, sent that in, got an interview, got hired, and went to work. Right. So I worked at GM. I had the kind of job most people would kill for. Right. Almost all new cars that we worked on, the future stuff, beautiful shop, every piece of equipment you could imagine, epoxied floors, the whole deal. Right. But that wasn't enough.
This was in what, like 80
That was
something?
85. I went
Okay.
to work at GM. And so I was doing that every day, working. They came up, and the GM was looking for somebody that could teach some technical skills, and I was pretty advanced compared to a lot of guys, and so I applied for that position. Ended up getting a job as running education and training for Cadillac Engineering, and so I did that. And then as time went on, we were doing all these crazy things for interpersonal skills and teaching people how to be involved in the business, and so before it was done, I had 900 employees that I was responsible for all their education and training.
Holy
We,
cow.
yeah, created on-site degree programs so people could go to work all day and go to college after we finished that. Right, earn
That's
your
awesome.
degree at night. Did all kinds of training. Uh, I was one of the people, and one of the few people that was a presenter. There's an award called the Malcolm Baldrige Award, and it's an award that it's all over the world, and it's acknowledgement for your processes and how you do things and what you do and everything else. I was the sole UAW represented skilled trades person in all of Cadillac Engineering that was presented to them.
That's
So
awesome.
I did that kind of stuff, right? And then that facility ultimately was getting shut down. They were trying to get me to go to Flint, which was where the bulk of that was going. I told them they'd have to promote me and make me salary, and so that happened. I had earned my degree through our on-site degree program. I didn't go to college when I got out of school. I didn't go to college till I was 32 years old, and then got my
Wow.
degrees. And so I got promoted, transferred to Flint, Michigan, to what's called the Great Lakes Technology Center, and went about building, prototypes and experimental cars up in Flint. We worked 12
What
hours a day, 7 days a week for 2.5 years.
what prototypes out of all those cars eventually became production cars?
Well, in that case, it was all we did Cadillacs. We did all of the Cadillacs. We did the high end Buicks, the Rivieras, and we did the Oldsmobile Tornados and all those kind of cars. So we built all of those, all the prototypes and all the first evers to kind of certify how they would work, and those kind
Very
of
cool.
things there. So I spent 8 years there, and then so I had spent about 4 years running the floor. I had 50 something people that worked for me, and they were the ones that actually hand assembled the whole cars. Well, we had a division in that company that was electrical based, and it was always a nightmare. Electronic technology was advancing rapidly in the late 80s into the mid 90s, and then into the 2000s. It's pretty much evolved pretty steady since, although it's settled down recently. In the last 5-7 years it settled down, but as that was changing, it was always the biggest issue in trying to build cars. So they came to me and asked me if I would run that department. So I went in and took over all of the electrical and all of that. I had 65 employees over 3 shifts that worked on that stuff. So I did that for about 3 years, and we went from it being the number one problem to it not being a problem. I mean, we went from it being the biggest blockade to building cars and getting them done, starting them on time, building them on time, to it just happened, right? So my big boss was a lady named Kathleen Dilworth, and she was a great lady to work for. And she would promote, I got multiple promotions and I got all those things. She ultimately came to me and she said, "There's a group in Warren, and they're the group that does all the advanced engineering on these all the car programs and truck programs." She said, "That's where you need to be, and I've recommended that you go there." And
Oh wow.
so that led me to being transferred to Warren, and I went to work in that group, and it had a whole bunch of names, but it kind of in the middle of its life, it was called Advanced Vehicle Integration, and we were off site. We were in a leased building, not on any of the GM complexes, and we were the group that you went to for the first ever of anything. The first ever Pontiac Solstice, we designed, engineered, and built driving prototypes in our building.
Hell yeah. Is that the red car that you sent over to us?
That's the hot rod Solstice. That's a later story, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but that car, right? The first ever one we built. The first ever Chevy Colorado we built. The first ever SRX Cadillac we built.
Wait, hold on. I gotta ask you, Mike. What's up with the 5 cylinder on that Colorado? I remember when those came out. I was like, that's a head scratcher.
Yeah, that was actually, that whole program was done at Isuzu, and outside of the U.S., 5 cylinders are very popular.
Okay.
So it was an easy way to upgrade. The truck wasn't long enough to hold a six, and the 4 cylinder, the 4, 5, and 6, the 6 that went in the Trailblazer, the 4 cylinder, and the 5 cylinder were basically the same engine, just with or without an additional cylinder or two.
Interesting.
And so they powertrain designed that, and they had a need for a 6 cylinder for the Trailblazers and for the Envoys and those kind. They had a need for a 4 cylinder, and then they wanted to up level, and Isuzu came back and said, "Do a 5 cylinder," and that's how it happened.
Very cool. I love those trucks, by the way.
Yeah, I've got one with 2,100 horse in it.
Holy hellfire. Yeah, that one's not a 5 cylinder, huh?
No, it's a twin turbo LS.
Yeah. That's
So,
awesome.
but
But I'm sorry, I interrupted.
that's all right. It's all good. So, but anyway, that we built all of those there, right? And that led to things like, we did under the table, at the risk of being fired, all of us, the first ever C5 Corvette. There was no Corvette program. There was not going to be a Corvette program, but we had built a Camaro with all the advanced suspension and everything, and powertrain and everything that went into a C5 ultimately, and we put it in a fourth gen Camaro body, and that was our test car. So when they ultimately turned the program back on and said, "Okay, we're going to build a fifth gen Corvette," we went, "Well, here, why don't you copy this?" The
You're like John DeLorean swapping that engine in his boss's car while he's at lunch.
Yeah, but I had a whole department I worked with, right? I mean, that's the great part about my career and about the things I've been able to do. Whether it started, when I was, I don't know, 10 years old, working in my garage with my dad, through the dealership times and in particular in the GM world, I've had the opportunity to work with some of the most talented people you would ever meet in your life. And I learned from every one of them. And when I went into advanced vehicle integration in GM, there was one engineer that worked in there. He's still a personal friend. He actually does work for me for Arrington. He's my engineer that handles a lot of that stuff. His name's Al Butlin. He was the smartest engineer I'd ever met in my life. He knows
That's
things,
saying something.
and he's taught me things still today, right? And I've taught him some, but I think he's taught me more. But he is just so smart. And on the powertrain side, an engineer named Al Klein, the same way. I mean, these guys are on a plateau, maybe not in everything, right? But in their areas, they're on a plateau where I don't care who you are, you could learn from them.
Well, I'm telling you, Mike, that's why I really love this format. And I love that I get to run this show because I get to speak to people like you. And this whole time, I'm just downloading all this information. And I love it, because I always learn. And I mean, I've consulted you a few times on projects of mine. So that's why I was so keen to have you on. And I appreciate your vast experience.
Well, and I appreciate that. And I don't care who you are, you learn from everybody. I learn
Oh, yeah.
from you. I learn from everyone, right? So back to my GM days, right? So I'm building all these cars. I'm designing electrical systems. At one point in time, I have 12 vehicle programs running with 10 different countries. So GM's a worldwide company. I'm dealing with people out of Japan. I'm dealing with people out of Mexico. I'm dealing with people out of Europe. I'm dealing everything all over the country, right? So I'm doing all these different programs. Uh, I'm driving 45 miles to work and 45 miles home. And on bad days, that's 3 hours in Detroit,
Oh.
right? So the GM test facility, the Milford Proving Grounds, is literally at the end of my street. You have to drive around it to get in the front entrance, but it's at the end of my street is the proving grounds. So it's 6.5 miles through the country to get there, right? So every time I'm doing appraisals and I'm doing whatever, they're like, "What's your career goal?" And I said, "Milford." And they're like, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Don't care. I'll mow the grass. I want to be a Milford." This drive is killing me, right? So anyway, I get transferred to Milford, and they actually moved my department there. I didn't get transferred; they moved
Oh,
my
wow.
whole department. So I'm out there. I'm still building prototype cars. I'm still building all this stuff. So I get a phone call one day, and they said, "We need you in Warren." So I jump in a car, drive to Warren. I go in, and they said, "We'd like you to oversee the program, and build a car for Hot Rod Magazine." They've got an agreement with the performance division, who is brand new at this point, to build what became the Hot Rod Solstice. So they said, "We'd like you to build that car, oversee the build and build it." So, okay. Now, I had done some other performance cars, right? Like I had built the World Challenge Cadillac CTSV. First, I
Oh.
had done the first ever CTSV. Then I did the World Challenge development car. I did a number of other programs like that. But the Hot Rod Solstice was the first one where I really worked direct with the magazine, right? Because we agreed not only to build the car, but to show them how we built it. So I we agreed to do that. I get the project, and it came with a set of vehicle technical specs, right? So this is like 05, 2005. Yep, that car. So they came with a set of vehicle technical specs, which said it had to run tens and a quarter mile. It had to stop from it had to run from 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds. It had to stop from 60 to 0 in under 100 feet. It had to run. Basically, they took a lot of the criteria that the original AC Cobra had and then tightened it up some. It had to pull
Okay.
more than 1G lateral on street tires. It had to do this whole list of requirements, right? So I took about building that car. I had a good team that I worked with. We designed all the parts. It ended up with a 585 horse LS7 in it, which was kind of brand new then, and nobody was making that kind of power with them. We designed all the suspension, made the knuckles, put Corvette hubs in it, modified an SSR Tremec 6-speed, put it in it, did a cast iron version of the Cadillac CTS-V rear differential and put it in it with all independent suspension. 6-piston Brembos, Olin shocks. The
Good
body is
Lord.
all carbon fiber, the front end, the fascia, the doors, the deck lid. We made a roll cage and integrated it and pierced the frame rails to create more structure in the frame. I mean, there was not a single thing that we didn't touch in that car. It started at 3,260 pounds, and when we were done with the LS7, with the Tremec, with a cast iron diff, everything in it, it weighed 2,860.
Wow. Wow. Talk
It
about a rocket
ran
ship.
the quarter mile in 10.9 seconds on a 40-degree day on street tires with snow flurries flying around. It would pull 1.01 G lateral on street tires, pull 1.31 lateral on road race tires. It would stop from 60 miles an hour in 91 feet.
Good Lord.
The thing is just an animal, right? Did everything it was supposed to do and more. The magazines covered it. They had never seen a car designed or engineered like that. And that pretty much put Mike Copeland on the map.
Yeah. And then you had a lengthy career with them afterwards, which I want to touch on. But
Did I lose you
are we?
guys?
So, Mike, we took a bit of a recess because your phone was dying, and we're back. But you were regaling us with the Mike Copeland tale, and we were at the point where you were just starting to do some really crazy stuff for the magazines.
Yeah, well, I just finished the Hot Rod Solstice, so I assume you got that. But that was the first time I had ever really worked a whole bunch with the editors for like the magazines, right? And all their top people, Doug Evans, and there was a guy named Bruce Miller and all those people, right? Jerry Pitt. They came in just assuming that in the OEs, we built cars like regular people build cars, right? And they came in, and I was going through how we built the car, and I showed them some of the things we had done as an example with restructure in the front and how I used arrow-shaped tubes to create airflow through the radiator, and how we engineered a shifter and a mechanism for that, and how it all, did it in math and designed all that stuff and made it work. And so I went through the car front to back and explained to them how we did all those things and what we did. And I don't think they'd ever seen any of that, right? It's not the way hot rod shops typically build cars. A lot more today, guys CNC stuff and design some stuff in math. But I mean, you're kind of on the minor level compared to where you operate in an OE, right?
Right.
And to my advantage, right? I had exposure. I had availability of all of the math that we designed new cars with. I had all of that information. Inside GM are a lot of real gearheads, right? Some real hot rodders and guys that love doing this stuff, and to be able to be a part of a car like the Hot Rod Solstice or some of the other ones I did, Project X and the 34 Chevy, and then the crate motor shootout, all of that kind of stuff, right? To be a part of that, they just were tickled to death, and they brought all their expertise and all their skills, and I got to take advantage of it. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
You
so
touched on some prolific builds just in that brief moment. Especially the one that stuck out in my mind was Project X. I had no idea that you had such heavy involvement in that particular car.
yeah,
Um,
ground up. Yeah,
that's
I mean
awesome,
that.
man.
Yeah, so I mean, being a young guy through the years and a hot rodder, I realized that car started its magazine life in 1965. Okay, I used to hide that the magazines with that car in it in my history book and read it during history class. Right? I mean, I knew of that car years before. There was a time in that car when they did an engine and they painted it red, white, and blue, a small black Chevy, blue
Yeah.
with white stars and the red and white stripes, and they had done an engine for that car in the magazine. And I was probably, I don't know, 19, 20 years old. I had tried to copy that in my own engine build.
I'm curious how all this time spent at GM. It seems like you're working toward something. You retired and then ended up at Lingenfelter. How did that happen?
Well, I built a lot of cars at GM. I mean, a lot of the stuff, whether the Reggie Jackson Camaro, the first ever LSX build ever, the Hot Rod Solstice, Project X. I did the crate motor shootout, which was 8 engines in one car over 4 days. We made over
Holy,
120 quarter-mile runs, 7 engine swaps, 6 torque converters, 4 axles. Right? I mean,
oh my
we did a
God.
lot of crazy stuff. I built the E-Rod 55 Chevy that launched the E-Rod engine program. I did a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, right? Like all the accessory drive systems available through Chevrolet Performance, going back a few years, but I had put all those together, right? So I knew I had access to the factory numbers, and so I did all that stuff, right? But as in many things, there's a lot more to a picture than what you see, right? I mean, I got to work with a lot of people in the industry. I got to build a lot of cool stuff. Worked with some really talented guys. GM was going through bankruptcy, and it was really a tough time, right? They didn't have any money. They didn't want to do this. They didn't want to do that. Everything got second guessed. Everything else. I had been working on the Copo Camaro program and putting together the outline, the plan for that, and doing all the designs for the suspension and the mass analysis and all of the other things that go with it. And
So this must have
yeah,
been around 2012.
yeah, it's 2012-ish, 13,
Okay.
right? So that's kind of going on, and they actually it was yeah. So it's around that time frame. So GM is getting ready to go through bankruptcy, and there's a whole bunch of people that are getting let go, and there's Black Tuesdays, and there's all of those things.
No worries. But you were saying these Black
Okay.
Tuesdays, all this crazy stuff
Right.
going on.
Yeah. So all of this stuff's going on in GM. At the same time, they were going through every employee inside GM and identifying what they called critical skills, people that they felt they had to retain at all costs. So all of that's going on, right? Well, I ended up on that list. I ended up on the list of keep no matter what, right? So my boss comes to me. Well, at the same time, a retirement program comes out. And the retirement program is, I qualify for it by one day.
Oh wow.
And it was a good program, right? I mean, it basically would have taken me at that point where I was 56, and it would have paid me uh, all the way, everything I would make with my retirement plus Social Security until I was 62, and then I would retire and go on my regular retirement program.
Oh
It
wow.
was a good program, but they wanted to retain me. My boss came to me, "What's it take?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do." Right? I owned Diversified at that point. We had opened Diversified in 2004. So I owned Diversified. I had, that to fall back on, that to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So they come to me, and they probably came to me a dozen times, and finally I said, look, here's what it takes to get me to stay. One, I want to leave my office in Milford, my main office, and I had one there and I had one in Warren. I said, but I'll be happy to keep my main office in Milford, even if I have to go to Warren a couple days a week or when I'm building a project. I don't care. Second, I want to build the Copeland Camaro program. It had been off and on like 6 times at this point. And I said, I want to build that program. So there were a couple other things, right? And but anyway, so now I'm with the big boss at this point, and he says, okay, done. You got it all. So I agree to stay, right? Bankruptcy hits. We go through the bankruptcy. We come out the other side of that. At this point, they'd let me order 2 body in white Camaros to start building that program with. Al Oppenheiser, who was at this point chief engineer of the Camaro, you probably heard Al's name.
Oh yeah.
He was who I worked for back when I built the Hot Rod Solstice and Project X and all these other cars. So he gets me 2 body in whites out of the plant. I get them sent in. We start prepping them. We're stripping body sealer and all that stuff out of them to get ready to start building cars. We're through the bankruptcy now, just on the other side. They come in and cancel the cars again, right? And it was really, really a bad time in GM. I mean, managers, nobody was willing to take any risks. Nobody was willing to step out. Nobody, everybody wanted to stay under the covers, right? And not any attention. And that was not my world, man. I mean, and what I did, I was out 2 steps past the edge all of the time. You couldn't do what I did and stay and operate within the regular processes and do that kind of stuff, right? I mean, realize my record for a SEMA build car, from a bare painted shell to load it on a car hauler to go to SEMA, is 4 days.
Oh my God.
And we drove it into SEMA.
Wow. Which is more than can be said for a lot of cars.
Right. So anyway, so I'm going through all of this, and we're prepping for SEMA in 2010. And so I decide I've had enough. All right. So my big boss comes out and says, they don't want to send you to SEMA this year because of budget and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I don't care. I'm going anyway. Right. I go under my own companies. We had started Diversified years earlier. So anyway, so I go, and we had actually built a truck for Lingenfelter that had the first ever E-Rod 5.3 in it. The GM had Lingenfelter to build because they didn't have internal resources to do it. And then Lingenfelter didn't do that kind of work. So they hired my company, Diversified Creations, to build this ground up 55 Chevy truck. And that we had 10 weeks to do that from the day it started until the day it had to leave. So we built a ground up Dynacorn body, never been assembled, never been one finished. I came up with the idea to take a Trailblazer SS chassis and clip the ends and put it all underneath the truck and make all of that function and work. And so anyway, we built that at Diversified and ran the regular business. So, there was a bunch of grief because I had built that. They also realized that it was the year that Jim Campbell became the voice of the GM Performance, which became Chevrolet Performance. He was doing the keynote opening speech at SEMA, and they wanted to display E-Rod cars. And they realized at that point there were 3 in the world. The 55 Chevy I had built at GM, the 79 Z28 E-Rod Camaro that I had built for Hot Rod, and the 55 Chevy that had the E-Rod 5.3 in it, and I had built all 3 of them. So they started chasing me, wanting the Camaro for this opening breakfast thing, right? And I didn't. First, it was Hot Rod's car. It wasn't my car. I built it for them. GM had supplied the engine, but it was Hot Rod's car. So they're hounding me, wanting the car, wanting to know where it is. It was in shipping. I had it shipped, out, and I used Pilot Transport for all my shipping, so they didn't have access to any of that information. And so they're hounding me to death. Now, my wife and I, because I work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, every year getting ready for SEMA at GM, because there were always a lot of cars and there was always never enough time. So every year, everything had to be on a car hauler heading for Vegas on Thursday morning. So no matter what, I had to be done Wednesday night. So every Thursday morning, my wife and I would leave for Vegas, go to Vegas and vacation for 3 or 4 days. And then I would go to work and she would fly home. And when SEMA started, so they realized the only E-Rod car was the car I built, the Camaro, and that was the only one that was slated to be there that could really be shown, because they hadn't announced the 5.3 yet, so they didn't want to show the truck. So they must have called me 40 times, and that was just, and down to the point that they tried threatening me, and that doesn't work with me. So, so anyway, Doug Evans, who was the big dog at Hot Rod then, agreed to let him use the car. The problem with letting him use the car for the opening thing at SEMA is it wouldn't be in its booth, right? You had to take it out of the booth and take it to that area. Nothing is allowed to be moved while SEMA's open. No cars, no anything, right? You can't even move a pallet of anything, a pallet of catalogs. Nothing gets moved at 9 a.m. when they open SEMA until 5 p.m. when they close it. So this was Hot Rod's poster car, the Camaro. It was the one the model was signing all the autographs with. It was all of those things. And I wasn't going to take it out of Hot Rod's booth to let them use it for an hour, right? So Doug Evans agreed to support that. It went there. I had pretty much had enough. So my big boss was there at SEMA. So I went and saw him and said, hey, when this is over, I want to talk. And it was, I was going to retire, right? I was going to leave.
Right.
My plan was to just go to Diversified, work there, do that, right? It was successful. It was all of those things. So while this is going on, I asked for a sit down with the big boss and blah, blah, blah. And he puts it off. We end up out a ways. Of course, the truck is a big hit. Ken Lingenfelter, who I had met the year prior, but that was our first real interaction. And he told me after, he said, I saw the truck 3 days before it had to be done, and there was no cab on it, and there was no this and no that. And he said, and I knew you weren't going to make it. He said, but you did, and you stayed true to your cost, and you did all of those things. So he wanted to meet with me while I was waiting for GM to talk to me. I went and met with Ken. We spent 12 hours in interviews together, 4 separate times, 3 hours each time. The last time we met, he took, he said, I'd like to offer you the position to run the companies. He said, we'll have to stage kind of what you give you for a title. So we bring you in one way and then take you out, then change your title, whatever, because Lingenfelter had a long tradition with a lot of people. And so anyway, and then he took me back in the collection, which was 200 cars at this point, all these exotics, but to me, all these muscle cars, right? 67 Shelby GT500, 69 Yenko Chevelle, 70 LS5 4-speed El Camino. It's muscle cars everywhere, right? And there's probably 45 of them in a room. And we walked through all the exotics. I mean, $1 million Bugattis and Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all this stuff, and an entire room with probably 75 Corvettes in it, of everything you can imagine. And he says, and if you come to work for me in your position, you get to drive whatever you want, whenever you want.
Well, that's a good perk.
Okay. So finally, with me sending numerous emails and numerous everything else, so I tell Ken I'll come to work for him. On January 20th, my big boss calls me in, and we sit down, and he starts telling me what we're going to do and this and that. And I said, look, we're not going to do anything. I said, I'd like to work till January 31st to finish the month, this being the 20th. I said, but if I need to go now, I need about a half hour to pack my stuff.
Let it be known that Mike Copeland plays a little hard ball.
So I left. Well, and then I left that day, and then I started getting calls. I had a lot of friends, and a lot of, vice president level and a lot of others, right? And then word starts spreading that I'm leaving. And so they're calling me, don't go, stay, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, nope, I'm out of here. I'm not going to put up with this. Why are you calling me out of fix? It's like, that's not who I am. That's not what I do, right? I take care of my own stuff and move on. So anyway, I retired from GM on January 31st. And on February 1st, I started at Lingenfelter. So I had an 8-hour retirement. And so I go to work at Lingenfelter. I agreed to spend 5 years with Lingenfelter at that point. So I did. In that 5 years, we made drastic changes to Lingenfelter. I mean, we upped the game tremendously, launched marketing campaigns, built vehicle programs. I made arrangements, and Lingenfelter got one of the first ever ZL1 Camaros built. We were the first to run in the 10s, which, by the way, I oversaw the engineering of when I was still at GM. So, but we got one at Lingenfelter right away, and we ran not the whole car, but a bunch of the designs I was over. So intercooler systems and stuff like that. So, but we get a car. Within 2 days, we're at the track with it, and we run 10 in the 10s. 10, I think we went 1080 with the thing.
Yeah.
Right? I think it was the third day that we had it. We run 1080s. So everybody's, so others have got their cars, and they're trying to be the first in the 10s, but we beat them, right? So then they go out, and then we disappear, right? We go around 1080s, and we disappear. So they're all trying to, they think we're coming back, so they're trying to beat us and trying to run faster than we do and everything else. So one other company got one and went like a tenth faster than we did, right? Well, what they didn't know is that I had already set up, and we left there, made a couple little minor changes to the car. I had made arrangements with Hot Rod Magazine and with Freiberger that we were going after 200 miles an hour with our ZL1. So we're in Uvalde, Texas on the Continental Tire test track. And it is 75, 80 degrees. Now, this test track was made in 1956 as a 2-lane and widened to 3-lane in 59 and has never been resurfaced.
Oh, wow.
It's an 8.5-mile oval with 3-mile corners. So it's 3 miles from the start of the corner to the exit of the corner. And what they really use it for is just to run miles on tires. They have a maximum speed of 80 miles an hour on the track. But they agreed to let us use it, and they gave us access, right? Because Hot Rod had a deal with General, who's owned by Continental, and all of that stuff, right? We got Continentals on the car. So we're out there, and we're trying to run 200 with it. And Freiberger's driving, and he's a phenomenal driver, right? And really into the big speed and all that stuff. He's been 250 or 260 something at Bonneville. So, but we're trying to sort out what we have to do. And we got data recorders in the car, so we know what we've done, the speed and everything else. And we're running 190, 198.9, 199.7, all of these speeds right at 200, right? And we got V-Box data recorders in the car and cameras. And the first time we hit 200, they shut off, and we lost the data. Right?
Oh, no.
So and we don't want to modify the car anymore. We don't want to do any of that stuff. And I mean, we knew there were some things we could do, take spoiler off, do this, do that, but we didn't really want to do that. So Freiberger's telling me, I don't think we're going to get it. And I said, and I got all this data, right? And I got all the data out of the car. And I said, yeah, we can. You just have to keep your foot on the floor. And he's like, what do you mean? And I says, you're letting off here and you're letting off there. And you know, and I got data that proves it, right? And he's kind of, you know. So anyway, he goes out. Now these corners are flat, 3.5-mile corners. And the normal exit speed on this corner, you're not supposed to go faster than really like 80 miles an hour, right? On this track. His corner exit speed we ended up running 202.67 miles an hour. His corner exit speed is 187 miles an hour out of the corner. And he hits the straightaway and they got a dip. And now the wind is picked up to about 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And our V-Box data recorders, we can overlay with Google Earth so we can look at everything, right? And as he comes out, he's in an inside lane. He's 100, exit a corner like 187. He's on the throttle, buried foot on the floor, half, you know, all the way through the corner practically. Hits the straightaway. As he hits this dip in the track, a wind gust catches the side of the car and pushes it over a lane at like 198 miles an hour. So he goes from the inside lane to the center lane and never lifted. At 202.67 miles an hour in the car.
Good Lord.
You know, of course, they've got people there, Hot Rod does, and they're recording it and they're doing all this stuff. And we got all that. So they instantly put it out to the world that we've run 202, right? And my phone lights up from all these people inside GM and all this other stuff, because realize this was when Shelby claimed their car had run 200, right? And now we had just gone and done it and proved it with live feed and everything else. And it was kind of funny. Shelby and Ford actually had that track rented for the next weekend to try and run 200 in a Shelby, and they pulled out when we did it.
Oh, wow.
So, but we owned that, right? And that was all you could find. If you typed Camaro in Google for 3 months, that came up. So, but we got to do a lot of those things at Lingenfelter, right? I mean, you know, Ken is a phenomenal guy to work with and work for, and I got to build some great stuff, right? We did the Reaper truck program, which was kind of a competitor to the Ford Raptor, but we sold 550 trucks in a year, right? I mean, we did a lot of that. We built Camaro programs and CTSV programs, and you know, I wanted to do everybody was pushing a horsepower number, right? I wanted a 900 horsepower upgrade kit for CTSVs and CO1 Camaros.
Good Lord.
So, and I wanted to be able to offer that as a package. So my wife has a Jeep Wrangler that I had a CTSV motor in. It was making 630. I pulled that motor out of the Jeep. We took it to Lingenfelter. We developed a program. It already had good pistons and rods. We did a CNC program, did a camshaft, put a Kenny Bell 3.6 blower on it. We actually made just over 1,000 with it at that. But then we detuned it, and in her Jeep it makes 926. But we used that motor to develop that package, and then started selling that package, right? Which has now led to the direct injection stuff and the 1,000 horsepower. There are 1,000 stories I could tell about Lingenfelter, things we did. You know, we bought the first ever when they came out with the direct injected, the LT engine. You couldn't buy them, right? But I happen to know that when GM loads part numbers, or when they would, I don't know if it still is, but when they loaded part numbers into the system, if parts were in the warehouse, they couldn't lock the system for 2 days because the way the computers were structured. So I had guys monitoring every morning for when they loaded the engines. I had made arrangements to buy the first ever Chevy truck with a 5.3 direct injected motor, because that was the first one. And when they loaded the part number for the engines, there were engines available and we ordered 2 engines before they could lock them. So they got shipped to us, and then GM figured it out and came and wanted them back. But we already had them on the dyno.
Yeah.
So we were trained out, because they had said you couldn't break the code and you couldn't hack it. So
You're like modern Vince Piggins and breaking the whole central production order. That's awesome.
right, but so and Lingenfelter, again, tremendously talented people, and so, but we figured out, like, in the first ever, once we had the engine on a dyno and we could crank it, but it wouldn't run, right? So there's an immobilizer system in the truck that transmits a million different codes, and that has to line up with what the body computer transmits to what the ECM sees, or the engine won't run. So we took that truck and parked it outside the dyno cell and tapped into the CAN communication and fed that into the ECM on the dyno. So we would have to go out in the truck in the parking lot and crank the key to fire up the engine on the dyno. So we had engines running, I think, 3 days after we got it. I mean, and so when you look at how far Lingenfelter is with development on a lot of those parts, whether it be the high flow and high volume fuel pumps for DIs and all of those other parts, cylinder heads. I mean, we started there, right?
Yeah, Mike, you're directly and indirectly responsible for a lot of, as well as all the people that you've worked with, but directly and indirectly responsible for this performance trickle down effect. What you were alluding to just a moment ago. These street cars now that we're seeing that are over 1,000 horsepower. That's like every day now. Like, if you're not making 1,000 horsepower, then you're I don't know what you're doing. And it seems to have started there with you guys. I'm sure other people were doing it as well, but
Sure.
not to that level.
Well, and we had some advantages, right? I mean, the advantage that I had from a lot of that is I had been at GM working on stuff 4 or 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future. So now that stuff was in production, right? So I knew it 4 years ago, 5 years ago, which is, I mean, when I decided to retire from Lingenfelter, I worked all the time when I was at Lingenfelter. I spent 41 weekends a year on the road. I traveled all over the world. I would fly to Atlanta and then get on a plane and fly to Dubai and spend a week in Dubai and fly home. And then I get on a plane in Atlanta and fly to Texas and be in Texas for 4 days at an Optima race. And then I would,
all whilst simultaneously running Diversified Creations as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was the figurehead. My son and my wife really ran it. And if something happened and they needed help, right, they would call me and wherever I was. And then obviously when you do what I do, you're pretty well connected, right?
Right.
That was, I've had that luxury for a long time. I have a Rolodex most would kill for.
Yeah,
And
I bet.
I always tell people the thing more important than having their number is that they answer when they see your name, right?
Right.
And I've been able to build that through the years, right? So it's fun, right? I mean, I've had employees that work for me. I came in one night years back, and one of my sales guys on the counter is just staring at me, right? And I'd come in after work in those days, and I come in and blah blah blah. And finally, I said, "What are you doing? What's going on?" Right? He says, "You had a phone call today," and I said, "Okay, I probably get phone calls every day, right?" No, you don't understand. It was Chip Foose. I said, "Yeah, how's Chip doing?" He said, he had a question for you about a vehicle to get it to run." I said, "Yeah, okay." It's just, but I've been really lucky, right? And I got to do all those things. So, but Lingenfelter wore me out, right? Used me up. I mean, we had grown the company exponentially. We had done all of those things in that period, and I just was used up. I had done my 5 years. It was a little over that. My wife and my son, they thought they said I looked so bad I was like a ghost, right? Because I was 115,000 miles a year in the air, driving another 30, 40,000. I was somewhere,
on you for sure.
Every Thursday or every Friday, I was in an airport heading for someplace else. And on Sunday night on a red eye, I'd be heading somewhere different, right? So I decided to retire from Lingenfelter. I had done my 5 years I committed to, about 5 years and 3 months. So Diversified was doing great. Diversified's purpose was always to ultimately belong to our son. That was always the goal. So I decided to retire from Lingenfelter, and then I was just going to kind of do my own thing and goof off, right? Go into Diversified some, and then, try to not build the company around my skill set, to keep it around my son's skill set. And so I retired again. I was out 16 months, about 16 months. I just started to adjust to it. I was still at work virtually every day. I built 3 of my own vehicles in that time period, ground up builds. I'm not one of those people that can stop, right? I'm an extreme type A. So then I get a phone call. My wife and I'm just starting to adjust to be retired. We're on the way. We have a place over on the sand dunes where we play with our Jeep. It's Labor Day weekend. We're driving there. I get a phone call from Kim, who owns Magnuson Superchargers, and she owns Arrington, and she owns some other stuff too. But she has been trying to get, she owned Magnuson, right? And when I was at Lingenfelter and I did the program, we bought lots of Magnuson Superchargers. I mean, lots and lots of Magnuson Superchargers. And so Arrington was having challenges. She was trying to, go through some of this stuff and make it work. She had been through a few different people. She had tried to hire me a number of times to come run Arrington, but it was in Virginia and I didn't want to be there. So she calls me on that Friday about 5 o'clock and she says, what do you think about owning Arrington? Right. And I'm like, I don't know. Right. So we talked about it some. I said, well, let me talk it over with my wife and family. I need some more data. I'd already done most of the due diligence because, I offered to come in and help them, with that company and all these other things. So that was on Friday. We talked about it all weekend. It was Labor Day, so we were all up at our place up there. I called her on Monday on the way home and said, we'll take it. And on Wednesday, I was in Virginia to meet employees, to go through the facility and start looking at equipment and all those things. And I bought Arrington. Technically,
Man, I'm so
my
glad you
wife
did.
bought Arrington because she actually owns Arrington. So I own Diversified, and she owns Arrington.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, I had already had some history, right? Some Mopar history. When I was still at Lingenfelter, the Z06 Corvettes came out, the C7 Z06, and Ken was getting ready to order some, and we were using our contacts to get them built early and all that stuff. And he said, I had a ZR1 Corvette that was kind of my company car, and I had an Escalade. And he says, do you want a new Z06? And I said, well, hell yeah, who wouldn't, So we spec'd one out, and I ordered a new Z06, right? So, and before I ordered it, truthfully, the Hellcat story was out there, and there were some Hellcats out, and I thought, man, I should go drive one of those. I bet those are fun, right? Well, I didn't, and I ordered the Z06, and the day it arrived, we tore it apart and hopped it up, and it was 800 horse, and it was fun, right? I mean, let's be honest, the Z06 with 800 horsepower, there are a lot worse cars to drive.
Yeah.
But so I had it, and I was driving it and everything else. Well, I own Diversified. Freiberger and I are really good friends, David Freiberger. And we've done a lot of stuff together through the years. So he calls me up one day when I was still at Lingenfelter, and he calls me up and he says, hey, Roadkill just signed a deal with Dodge. He said, and as part of that deal, we get a Hellcat and an 8-speed automatic. We get a package to put into General Mayhem. He said, I figure you're probably the only guy in the world that can do that. He said, the president of Dodge says it's impossible. He said, I'll warn you that up front. I said, put it on a truck. So anyway, it showed up. And so at that point, Dodge shipped us 3 Hellcat cars, shipped us Charger and 2 Challengers, and they shipped us the one Charger was our parts car, actually 2 Chargers and 1 Challenger, and they shipped a Viper too, but that's a different story. So anyway, so we get the Chargers, and we're working on the one car, figuring it out how to tear it apart. I'm working, so I drive the cars, and if you've never driven a Hellcat, they are probably the most fun production car you can buy. I mean, the Corvette is refined and it's fast and it handles amazingly and it does all those things. The Hellcat is in your face. Come on, stomp the throttle. That's what they do, right? It will burn the tires at will. Now, my ZR1, my Z06, at 80, if you went back to third gear, they would wag the tail, right? At an 80 roll. The Hellcat would do that too. And it would do it. I mean, it was so fun to be abusive. And it was just
Right.
in your face muscle car. So we built General Mayhem, figured out all electronics, figured out all that stuff, built General Mayhem. Took us 3 weeks. I took a video of it running, sent it to Freiberger and all them. It went to the president of Dodge, said, "How you like me now?" So, I had that experience. We had done a few other, Mopar builds. We had put a Hellcat driveline 8-speed automatic into a Plymouth Superbird for a company out of California called Icon. And I mean, we made ABS function. We made Sirius radio work. We made the automatic temperature control function. I mean, we made everything work, right? It has all of that, still has everything functioning. So we did all that. So I had all this experience already, and I knew that Arrington was a great opportunity to go further with that. So we bought Arrington, moved it to Michigan, outfitted a new warehouse, new sales offices, added a whole bunch more hoists and everything else. We share a common shop between Diversified and Arrington, a common set of technicians and all that stuff back and forth. I oversee all of the custom jobs and all the special stuff, right? And for both companies, whether it's Diversified or Arrington. And then I have a shop manager, and I have really good people and on sales and on all of it. So that's what we do.
Yeah. Mike, I got to be honest with you. That was the first time that I took note of your name was watching that Roadkill episode, and I said, "Who is this guy? He's a guru. I gotta find out more about him." And so that's when I started doing a lot more research, and I've been a fan of yours ever since. And just one of the many reasons that I wanted to have you on the show, because I knew that you would expound on that story. So, and I'm so glad that you did. And you're continuing to push the envelope even today. I actually got a chance to meet you. What was it, 2 years ago during Pony Wars out in Vegas, and our paths have crossed several times after that. And I guess I usually like to end these interviews or wrap them up by asking people with as much experience as yourself a question that I pose for other people, but is secretly for myself. What's your secret? What advice can you give to the youth of today, or just people in general who want to have a similar career, maybe not the exact same, but just want to be involved in this industry in some capacity? What's your secret?
Well, one is you have to plan on hard work and lots of it, right? I don't care who you are. I don't care what job you do. If you take a position that it's a 9-to-5 job and that's what it's going to be, and you're going to walk out the door, you're never going to be more than that 9-to-5 job, right? You have to work. I still work lots of hours, right? I can't tell you how many overnight deals we do, right? The Charger we built to go to SEMA, the Hellcat powered 8-speed automatic car ground up that we took in 18. That car we assembled from a bare painted shell, but not even cut or buffed, to a done car that we drove into a car hauler in 13 days, right? My
Yeah, that doesn't get done
Rampage,
on its own.
yeah, my Rampage that we debuted last year at SEMA, this past year, 19. That car, there's not a part in it that's not touched, right? That was including body paint, everything, 10 weeks. And in both cases, we still run the companies. We still build other cars, right? We're building this Charger in 13 days, and I'm posting pictures, videos on Facebook of us dyno tuning a Hellcat Challenger or whatever, right? Because it's what you have to do to get that done, right? So hard work is the first thing, right? You have to be true to who you are, and you have to be straight with people, right? There's a lot of people in this world that'll tell you I'm very direct, and if you step on me or you screw with me, you will pay, right? That's who I am, and that's who I'm always going to be, right? By the same token, I have a lot of friends in the industry, and they know if they call me and they need something, I'm going to be there for them, right? I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna do whatever they need. If they need an engine built overnight, we're gonna do it, right? If they need whatever they need to get there, they're gonna do it, right? You have to be um, open enough to listen. There was something that happened in my life, right? I've been married since I was 19. My wife and I got married really young. And when I went to General Motors, I left a job that I enjoyed building offshore boats and drag boats and hot rods and Corvettes and all this stuff and repairing cars. I loved that what I did. I was on that path, and I joined GM. The first day I worked at GM, I went in and I went from a wide open 100-mile-an-hour pace to literally my first day, I did less than 10 minutes of work in 8 hours, right? And it drove me insane. I spent the day sitting on a stool. I couldn't stand it, right? And I walk out in the parking lot, and there's an assembly plant across the street and engineering. I'm parked in the lot, and there's a sticker that security's put on the window of my car that I'm illegally parked, and it's one of these stickers that won't come off, right?
No.
And I am so pissed off, right? I get in the car and I'm like, I'm out of here, right? I'm done with this shit. I don't need to work here. I don't need anything from them. I just don't need it, right? And I go home and I tell my wife this, and my wife says, I've never told you what you should do the entire time we've been married. She said, because frankly, you probably wouldn't listen anyway. But she said, I've never told you that. She said, but I'm going to tell you that if you quit GM, it will be the biggest mistake you've ever made in your life. And I got up the next morning and went to work, and I worked there for 26 years, right? I would not be who I am today, and I would not know the stuff I know or not be able to do the things I do had I have not spent that time at GM. And that time at GM was because she said it will be the biggest mistake you ever make in your life. Now, I could have easily not listened to that and went and quit. And I have no idea what my life would be, right? It could be better, it could be worse. I don't know, right? Because I never walked that path. But I know to get where I am, once in my life, I was smart enough to listen to her and do that.
That's hilarious, Mike, because that was going to be my next question. This is a bit of a philosophical kind of tangent here, but that was there's been a theme since we've been talking, and that's that I would consider you as an outside uh, viewer, right, to be a risk taker throughout your career. You've taken some chances and you've made some moves, probably very calculated. But that was going to be my next question was, how do you know which risks to take, which moves to make when you're playing at that level?
Well, I think you have to surround them and make those decisions more based on the circumstances around it, right? I mean, I was 19 years old, married, uh, had a daughter, and a mortgage and a car payment and all that kind of stuff, right? So when you're in those situations, you need to be a little more risk adverse, right? Ram Chargers offered me a job one time, right? They had the Ram Chargers speed shops that were around. They were here in Michigan. They had a full, they had an installation area and stuff in one of their stores, and they had offered me a job, right? And a young hot rodder, it's like, oh God, how does the world get any better, right? But it wouldn't have made enough money. I couldn't have made enough money to take care of the wife and the kid and the mortgage and that kind of stuff, right? So I turned it down. So every decision I've made, every move I've made has risk, but every one of them is as you said, calculated, and they're based on not just that move, but the things around them that make that happen. When I retired from GM, there was, I gave up 5 weeks of vacation and I gave up all these other things, right? But once I decided we were doing that, I knew I was going to make enough money. We were going to survive. I had diversified. I could always spin wrenches. I could always do all of those things, right? There were so many things I could do. So that made that decision easy. The decision to leave Lingenfelter was more a decision that had to be made for my health, and so that and I didn't realize how bad it was. My wife and my son did. It was like time to make the donuts, right? I got up every morning and I did what I did, right? I mean, I don't even know how many nights I spent in a hotel every year, right? And it's pretty bad when you get on a plane and the stewardess or steward know you.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, how you been? I haven't seen you in like a week or 2 weeks. Or, where have you been last? Or, I mean, there's people that travel a lot that have jobs where they live one place and travel to that job somewhere else, right? I met a number of those people flying around the country, right? And so that's understandable, right? That they get to know, because they take the same flight on Monday morning and the same flight on Friday night. So they do that. But I didn't do that. My flights were everywhere, right? And so it's just at some point you just have to make the best decision for you. And as long as you've got your basic needs taken care of, as I said, I have a whole bunch of cars, right? I have a motorhome. I have 5 car trailers, right? I don't have to have all that stuff, right? I mean, I have it. I want it. I enjoy owning it, but I don't have to, right? And you can live a couple months or longer on each one of those trailers if you had to sell them to
Yeah.
survive, right?
Yeah.
So that makes it a little easier, right? But risk is just part of it. You can't make stupid decisions. You can't make snap decisions. I would recommend you never let somebody talk you into a decision. I let somebody do that to me once. I spent 6 months working for a company, and it was the worst 6 months of my employment career that I had.
Oh no.
Right? But I learned from it, and I've made some smart decisions. I've made some not smart decisions. I'm sure there's a bunch of them in there that are just dead wrong. But
Well, it sounds like
overall,
you have a solid guiding light, and that's seems to be your family and your responsibility to them.
yeah.
And
My dad was a great, great man, and he taught me a lot. Right? He's been gone now 25, 26 years, and I believe, my wife and I sometimes will say we'll be in some business thing, some decision. This pandemic was started out an absolute nightmare, and I mean it basically. Over half of my staff didn't want to work, and all of those other things, right? So it's many times my wife will say, or I'll say, man, I wish my dad was still around so I could talk to him about this, right? But I don't have that luxury, so I try to be that for my son. I try to
I was
offer
going
that
to
to
say,
others, right?
you're the guy.
I get others that own businesses or guys that are trying to come up in this field or whatever it is, and I try and offer that advice. The number one thing I tell them is, this is the biggest small circle you've ever seen, and if you screw somebody in it, everyone will know. So
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about what you do, be a man of your word, and do the right thing.
I think that's a fantastic stopping point, Mike. Thank you so much. I really I can't thank you enough for imparting so much wisdom and sharing so much of your life with us. I feel honored. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. I appreciate you having me. I'm sorry we had all the technical screw ups. I'm sure you guys will make it look good.
Yeah, yeah. It's fortuitous that this happened to be the first pre-recorded episode that we've done, so
Thank
it worked
God.
out. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
But
Well, if you need anything, let me know. And again, I appreciate it.
I will. Thank you, Mike. Thank
All
you.
right.
Dude, I don't know what to say. I mean, it was just. I feel like I just entered the Matrix, and Morpheus downloaded, all this knowledge into my brain. I've been waiting to do that interview for a long time, and I could have talked to him for another 2 hours, honestly.
Well, I mean, it was really, really interesting, especially like, I'm sitting there listening, and then I look at the clock and I'm like, are you kidding me? We just lost half an hour. It felt like 5 minutes. Like, it didn't feel like anything. It's almost like you couldn't write a novel with that kind of storyline.
No, man. Mike's an amazing guy, and like I said, I've been waiting to do this interview for a very long time, and I wanted to give it its well-deserved attention, right? And so I think this was a good time to do the pre-recorded version. Technical difficulties notwithstanding, but yeah, it was awesome, man. And I don't think that that's going to be the last time that I talked to Mike on our show. Because there's so many stories that I wanted to get to. We just didn't have time to. Today he just posted on his Facebook about a build that I saw at SEMA in 2018 called Black Excellence. It's a 68 Dodge Charger Hellcat power plant. The thing's wicked. And it's got this crazy story about the owner. He was murdered for the car. It was stolen, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, I mean, those are the stories. We scratched the surface, the guy's had a career that triples, quadruples yours and mine. So
easily
in length, but
yeah. And it's interesting because it's like every rabbit hole is just, it's a new,
I want to know more.
Adventure.
It's hold on, I have questions. Yeah. So I try to do a good job and not spend too much time in any one place, but I really wanted to.
Yeah. Like if anybody needs to write a book about their life.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I wanted to ask him so much. I mean, he does so much in the pro touring realm now. I wanted to ask him about how he sets up a car. I really get into some technical stuff with him because I've done several stories now where I call up Mike and I ask him like, hey, how would you do this? Just like he was saying that, like, oh, Chip Foose calls him like, hey, I have this problem with this car. Mike's the first person I think of, like, when I was conceptualizing the build on my Firebird and I wanted to do like a Trans Am era kind of homage. I was like, man, I'm designing the rear end with these guys at Mosier. What would they do back in the day? What's the optimal setup for a short course or a road course? And call Mike, and he gave me a 30-minute download on exactly how he builds a car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it says a lot about him. I mean, like, let's not even take the previous 30 plus years, but let's jump into Horsepower Wars real quick. I'm sorry, Pony Wars.
Yeah.
When he made, that was the first year they brought in the Mopars.
Right.
And I'm not going to lie, I kind of was like, yeah, it's gonna struggle through the autocross.
Oh yeah, the Challenger's a boat.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I thought. And then I saw what he did with it, and I was like, okay.
Dude, it was so impressive. I was there and I saw like what they did, like the 60-0 stopping. Everybody was like blown away. The Challenger did best. Like, what? It was insane.
Yeah, it really. I mean, and part of that is the car, and part of that is what he did to the car. And I mean, you got a budget to work with, and he knows how to spend that budget.
A lot of people, for lack of a better term, a lot of people talk a lot of shit, and then when it comes time to put up, they sometimes fall short. Mike is not that guy. I mean, they went out there, and granted, they didn't win. They ran into some technical difficulties and Pony Wars with the blower and things like that. But ultimately everybody left and was super impressed with their showing, like what they did on the autocross, what they did on the drag strip. It was really impressive.
Oh yeah, he had nothing to hang his head about at the end of that. Even ending the way it did, he had nothing to hang his head about. It was a
Yeah,
very
man.
impressive.
Just to watch that guy work, and he's an older gentleman. Like, dude, how does he have the energy to put in 20-hour days still? I mean, good Lord.
Man,
I'm tired
I
after
wish I had
12.
it. Yeah, I wish I had that. I mean, I haven't put in a 20-hour day in a long time.
I mean, those are things that I've done, especially, in the military, and I often still find myself working long hours doing what we do, right?
Yeah,
But
I mean, but that's a 12 and 14. I mean, the difference between a 12 or a 14-hour day and a 20-hour day is 6 to 8
yeah,
hours. Like,
yeah. And I guess maybe I would have to ask him this, but maybe a key to that is mixing it up, right? You're not spending 12 hours in front of a computer. You're spending a few hours spinning some wrenches, a couple hours in meetings, a few hours on the computer. It adds up, and then you have this 20-hour day where you've been working. But to his point, it didn't feel like work.
yeah, for sure. I wonder how much coffee he goes through.
you know I don't remember seeing him drink any. Lots of water, though. We were in Vegas, like,
Well,
in the middle of
yeah,
summer.
you got it. I mean, oof.
He doesn't. Well, I can't speak for him, but yeah, we were all having a beer, and I guess it speaks to his calculated nature. We had work to do, and even after the day had wrapped, like, he was like, "No, we got work to do tomorrow," and he had like an iced tea or something. And I just remember, like, sitting there, like, watching him, and that was the first time I spoke to him at length, and I was like, dude, this guy, he's got a lot to teach me. Yeah, he's someone I need to know.
Yeah.
But anyways, we've tooted Mike's horn enough. He's a great man. Thank you again, Mike. We really appreciate you coming on the show. Greg, what's going on with Engine Labs? What's going on for next week? What can you tell our viewers?
Well, we got the really cool thing on the dyno test of the low shock technology cam load stuff that went up.
Yeah.
The cool thing about that is, obviously, there's gains, right? Because it's new technology. There was some not so expected results on the dyno, because it wasn't just the low shock technology. We also did some BSR shaft rockers in the LS, and some valve spring stuff. There were some interesting stuff. I mean, you really got to read it. It
was a good read.
It kind of surprised everybody. But except for Comp knew what was going to happen before they sent us the parts.
Yeah, no, I won't give it away, but it is an interesting read. I remember when you crossed that over to me, I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a very cool one. And then we should be having something post. It'll probably be live by the time this goes live, on the Aston Martin Valkyrie engine.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's we did something about it about 18 months ago. Tommy Perry did it, and it was just kind of an overview. But now Jason Fensky of Engineering Explained, who, if you read Engine Labs, we're huge fans of his, dives into it and gets into the math behind it and explains why it has some awesome numbers, but those awesome numbers are realistic. It's really interesting to see where the horsepower per liter blows everything else out of the water by a wide margin, but then its torque per liter, the BMEP, which we just wrote an article on, matches that of like a 2020 Mustang GT.
Interesting.
It is, and it's basically getting into like torque over time. And
yeah, how'd they? Well, I suppose the article will dive into that, but
yeah, I mean, it's basically because if you take torque and add RPM but maintain the torque, you increase horsepower.
Right.
So even though the torque number is the same from, or very close from, say 5,000 RPM to 10,000 RPM, which, yes, that's its operating range. The torque number itself isn't all that impressive because it's only, 568, I think, off the top of my head. So mid 500s. So it's not a huge number, but the fact that it can carry that 500 mid 500s to 10,000 RPM all of a sudden makes 1,000 horsepower. Real basic numbers, 500 pound-feet of torque, 10,000 RPM equals 1,000 horsepower.
Okay, all right. Earlier, I was thinking that you were talking about peak horsepower, but that's interesting.
Yeah, it's really, really an interesting thing. And plus, it's emissions legal.
Yeah.
They are expecting 100,000 kilometer, because, they're British, 100,000 kilometer lifespan for the engine. Can you imagine having, and it'll spin to 11.1 thousand RPM. So can you imagine having 60,000 miles on an 11,000 RPM engine from the factory?
Yeah, that's insane, dude. Yeah.
So
not unless it's on like a Honda sport bike.
Right.
Yeah.
But this is a 6.5 liter V12.
Yeah, exactly. That's insane, dude.
So that'll be cool.
Well, I look forward to seeing that. That you said that should be up tomorrow, huh?
Yep. Well, by the time this goes live, it'll be on Engine Labs. So yeah.
Very cool. Right now on Street Muscle, guys, go check it out. I know I didn't do too much audience engagement on this episode because I was just enthralled with what Mike was saying. But yeah, drop a comment if you have anything nice to say. And check out streetmusclemag.com right now because there's a really interesting article that dives into it's called Inside the Big Cat Family, Examining Hellcat DNA. And it's all about the similarities, differences, and just cool stuff about Dodge's Challenger lineup from the 1320 on up, and what they share as far as the 1320 is kind of an entry level drag pack of sorts. We talked about that last week with the guys from Diablo Sport, and it shares a lot of DNA with the Dodge Demon, which is obviously a very famous car. But yeah, it's a really interesting article. Go check it out. I conducted an interview with David Hakeem, who's had a lengthy career in the automotive media, and he's now with DodgeGarage.com. But that's what we got going on. Next week, we'll have another exciting episode for you guys. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know who we should have on, who we should talk to, and anybody else in the industry that you guys would like to see. I think that takes care of it, Greg.
Yep, I think so.
All right. Next week this time, guys. Peace.